Kia ora. Michael here. Yep. And this is Isolation Blues. Welcome back. Now, you're listening to this on the radio. You might be watching it on the telly. And if you've got friends who don't have a radio or they're outside of our transmission area, just say to them, Takiuru atu ki Arrow FM mo te whāngai ora, which is you can listen to the live stream from the Arrow FM website. Yep. All right, now I've got a guest this morning. I'll be talking to Darren Ludlow, who's the manager of the Access radio station in Southland, in Invercargill. That's called Southland, Radio Southland. Yep. I look forward to that. I thought I'd play you some music almost straight away because I've got the music here composed and performed by Lorenzo Bune. Now, Lorenzo was the partner of a woman who used to run the Access radio station in Wellington, Kedron Parker. Lorenzo's obviously Italian, and this CD is also entirely in Italian, and I think it's really good. So see what you reckon. This is Lorenzo Bune, and I think we're playing Ultimi Istanti. Ultimi Istanti.
Gente di cuore, di polso sicuro, gente che industrie vanno a creare, gente che campi vanno ad arare, future speranze di nuovi orizzonti in terre lontane vanno a morire.
Morning, Michael. Uber. Ta-da-ta-da. This is the turning season. Where'd that go?
ultimi addio,
Chan.
ultimi istanti.
Tommy Rowe. Very great.
Ultimi Istanti by Lorenzo Bune, who I told you before was the partner of Kedron Parker, who used to run the Access station in Wellington. And now the man who runs the Access station in Southland is on the blower there. Hi, Darren.
Well, Dana Michael, how are you?
Well, you know, considering, not too bad at all. Yeah. And you?
Yeah. There's a whole lot worse going on in the world, and you take small mercies every day, and you've got to hope that when we come out of the other side of this, whatever the other side's going to look like, that we're actually all going to be a little better for it. And amongst a whole lot of stupid that we're seeing going on, and those are people, busting for takeaways and leaving their rubbish everywhere. I'm seeing some bursts of humanity that have been missing since we were kids, and it's really hardcore.
That's right. Lots of genuine, good old fashioned neighbourly behaviour.
Yeah. It's I'd almost forgotten what it was like. We connect with our, we put up our 6-foot fences. Ages ago, and we felt like the world was more connected when the internet came along, but that wasn't really the case. So there are genuine conversations going on over the fence now, and they're pleasant enough that I think we're all going to stay in touch, right up until somebody forgets to return a cup of sugar that's been borrowed.
Yeah, hell to pay then. We have a neighbour. There's 2 neighbours on the one side there in that sort of semi-detached situation, and the one that's harder to see because you have to sort of look around the hedge, she's profoundly deaf and getting on, and every morning we have to kind of nosily stick our head through the hedge and peer into her living room and wave at her, and she waves back.
And that'll be big for her as well.
Yeah.
Just
and
that,
the whole.
It's that brief flash of interaction.
Yeah. It's
the
as
joy
we
of
walk
internet
around.
lagging.
I know, we're getting a bit of that, and that's a bit of fun too. Now, Darren, the challenges. You're an Access radio manager, but you're also a counsellor in Invercargill. You must have had some particular challenges, what with the very large bubble that you have there from the wedding in Bluff.
Yeah, and particularly because the wedding is associated with one of the staff members at the city council, and that staff member ended up losing their father-in-law, and recently also lost their mother. So, you go from what is supposedly your happiest day to just an unmitigated disaster, but nobody could have planned it. One guest, and what it goes to show is, as much as people will burst their 2-meter bubble to get their burger, they're forgetting about how easy it is for this virus to spread. One person turned up to that wedding who had the COVID-19 virus, and that was it. Suddenly we're in the middle of one of the biggest single clusters, and it was a much reduced wedding as well, I'm aware. It was probably half the size that it was going to be. But we've gone for between that and the Hereford conference that happened in Queenstown. So that's all part of the Southern DHB's area.
That's your area,
and. Yeah, which is essentially Oamaru South, everything. We were the worst place in the country as the COVID-19 outed. But flip that around to yesterday, and with the figures that came through, we are now the 11th straight day of no change, no increase, no new cases. So, it's the isolation in our context has worked. as tough as it is and as financially challenging as it is, and that's going to be one of the things. I'm talking to a guy on our radio station later on today who is the chair of the local Chamber of Commerce. Now, we hear a lot about businesses wanting to get up and operating again. This guy is absolutely the opposite. He's saying, no, we need to take our time. We need to take a very cautious, very staged approach. And that's because he had returned from a conference in Australia and was back before lockdown and didn't qualify to require to be tested, but just felt a little unwell and insisted, and had to go and insist on a couple of occasions quite strongly, insisted that he was tested, and turned out testing positive himself. So, much as he's the head of the local business organisation, he's taking a very human, sensible approach to how we deal with everything.
I get the idea that businesses in general are pretty much behind what's been imposed here, because they understand that short-term economic pain has to be endured if we're going to reach a stage where we can start to build again. You look at, you mentioned people who desperate for their takeaways. I looked at that Burger Fuel thing on the telly last night. I really felt for the business and the staff there. That was not an easy situation to manage. And it's the people, crowding in that make it very difficult. The businesses themselves know we've got to abide by the rules.
I guess it's the difference is understanding public responsibility, and that's something that we're tremendously aware of from my role in City Council. For example, we reopened our waste transfer stations yesterday, and you've got thousands of residents who've just spent the last 5 weeks gardening, and they all want to go and drop off their green waste at the same time, and despite being told that really urgent and wait a week, everybody was the most important and their trailer load was the most significant, and they all queued up in massive numbers that actually rivaled the drive-through at McDonald's. But there were staff. City Council knew this was going to happen, and there were staff on hand to make sure that everybody knew. And in that Burger Fuel instance, all they needed to do was have one additional staff member who was positioned outside, who could regularly yell out to everybody and say, hey, everybody, remember, please keep your distance. I think they were trying to hear the numbers that were being called, so perhaps they could have figured out a better way to do that.
Right. Well, a simple microphone, small personal speaker situation would have dealt with that. It's often very difficult to think ahead and come up with the creative solutions, but we need to do that. Yeah.
Well, seeing as they got a very public spanking yesterday from the Prime Minister, odds on I think they'll have had a different scenario in place by the time that opened last night.
Yeah. Now, as a councillor, you're obviously having to work remotely. Are you finding that there are particular challenges imposed by the lockdown? Are there extra duties? What does it look like for you?
So from a council perspective, we meet via Zoom, which, bearing in mind for some people who are technically challenged, that has been a steep learning process. All things considered, I'd give us an 8 out of 10, 5 weeks in. But we're meeting more regularly as well, and we had to be very nimble and change the way that we operated. So councils are strictly controlled by statutes, the Local Government Act, and standing orders. And whilst there were changes that were made to the Act recently that allowed for people to virtually join a meeting, what constituted a quorum was not people who were virtually joining. So whilst you could vote as you zoomed in, you weren't technically there, and you had to make sure you had enough people physically present. So at our first meeting, the first thing we had to do was to change our quorums down so that we only actually needed 1 or 2 people present in the same building, and everybody else could join in that way. The government the next day changed the law. So we were only a day ahead of it.
That's the sensible thing. Yeah.
Fine.
Because
and
really, we've got to think of situations
through
like this. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Of course.
A pragmatic approach, and everybody's reacting well to it as well, because there's this change, and it's a bit clumsy and a bit clunky at the start, but that's okay.
Yeah. I've talked with various people about the learnings that they've had through having to work remotely, and they realise there are efficiencies to be had. I was speaking with Kieran McAnulty, who's our Labour List MP, and he's conducting very important meetings entirely by video conferencing, and saying he's cut down his carbon footprint. He's not driving over the hill. He's not stressed about the difficulty of getting there if he gets stuck behind a logging truck on the Remataka Road. And generally, he thinks that there's a model there that could be followed in the future.
Yeah, I think we've discovered that there are actually more efficient ways of doing things. It's like our sector. If we look at Access Media, and there's a lot of emphasis being put on how we deliver our product. And once upon a time, we used to, turn on a knob, wait for the valves to warm up, and consume something that was being delivered there and then. Now it's all about multi-platform delivery and being able to access things on demand and live streams and the like. The thing is, there are still people out there who turn a switch on a radio and listen that way. So we still have to provide for them. And the same for how the MP conducts business. Whilst they're able to do a lot of stuff virtually, there are still people who, through their technical capabilities, or they might not even have a sufficient broadband plan that allows them to connect like that. Yeah. You've still got to, figure out ways past all these things. We're not fully digital yet, and that's a good thing, because there's nothing like that one-to-one organic interface with another human being.
Great, and you've segued seamlessly there into the access side of what you do, Darren. Various stations have found various different ways of managing during this period of lockdown. What have you been doing in Southland to cope, or to continue to connect with your community?
It's been busy, and as much as everybody's enjoyed 5 weeks of Netflix and marshmallows on the couch, I haven't. I've been flat out.
No, likewise.
And back in the studio, actually using our on-air studio to broadcast a show myself, to maintain that connectivity with people who are starved of human contact at the moment. And I haven't been on air in a live studio situation since 2011, so that's been fun getting back in that saddle. But learning how to make things accessible for staff remotely, I think we've found that 80% of our work has been able to be carried out remotely. But we've also had many of our program makers who have continued through various means. We've had some who've pieced their shows together on their little laptops at home. And whilst the sound quality for when they do the talking thing might not be what we purists like and are used to, everybody accepts that these are different times and things are going to sound a little bit different. We've also had some program makers who, through certain circumstances, have been able to continue to come into our studio, and there are really, even during level 4, because we were considered an essential service, and because there's a connectivity that Access Media in particular provides to parts of our community, we've allowed those people to come in, but essentially they've been the only person in the building while they've been here, and there's been a strict wipe down process before and after every broadcast, and we're checking the video to make sure that's been conducted.
Great. And I think that's what we'll do now. I mean, I've been absolutely the only person here. And it's been a strange thing, because we're in the business of communicating with people. And here we are now communicating, but we're essentially alone. And I've brought my singular bubble to this place right throughout, connected with all sorts of people, both regular program makers who's appeared on this program. A couple of them have done their programs with me just sitting at the desk making sure everything's going through. So that's been possible. But largely it's been a solo operation. And I must say, I'm desperate for the company again. Not only for Veronica, who is my workmate, but all of those different communities of people who come in and communicate with their listeners. I want them back here physically. That's the wonderful thing about radio. It's not all about technology, as you said. It's instant and vital.
I found it intriguing in that it took me, in a sense, back to my days in commercial radio when I was a breakfast radio host. And that beautiful part of the first half when you were the only person around, and I really enjoyed and almost missed that solitude. Halfway through your show, you'd get other people that would come along and join in. And whilst it's initially kind of weird being in the building by myself and being alone in the studio, then the phone would start to ring, and you would have somebody there who was just grateful someone was taking the time to make sure that they could provide chat and what's going on in their community and quiet reassurance, like we've done and for many years during cases of disaster. And that's been really gratifying. It's nice to know that what you're doing is matters, even if it's just to one person. That really makes your day.
And I think it's been good in that it really has. Not that we needed reassuring. We've always felt strongly that we provided a crucial service, but this has come home in this period. We've been a means by which DHBs and government bodies have got their messages across, and our broadcasters are desperate to get back, which tells you how important it is in their lives.
Yeah, we've noticed in Southland the number of services that have come to us and say, hey, look, we know you're doing this. We can hear there's a bit of traction out there. We need to get this message out. Can you help us with that? And it's been our pleasure to do that. Absolutely. When all this is finished, we're going to go and knock on their door and say, how do you feel about a bit of sponsorship? But from our perspective as a media, we heard the Prime Minister say how important community radio is, and that's great. There is a sense of frustration from within our sector that every time we look at what's going on or listen to what's going on in mainstream media, that there's a great amount of government messaging that's going on that's being paid for, and sadly, we're not getting that, and all our stations run on the smell of an oily rig, and that would be helpful. And I think that's something that our sector will take up, just to remind decision makers of our value. Our listeners, our consumers understand our value. We who work in it understand the value, because we feel good at the end of every day, having gone home, having made a few people's days better.
Yeah.
But money makes the world go round, and a little slice of the pumpkin pie would be nice.
Yes, we're not greedy folk. We just want to be able to survive comfortably. I'm envious of you on the smell of an oily rag. We have a photograph of a drawing of an oily rag that we used to get through. Works for us, but we could do with a little bit more. Yeah.
We used to broadcast from Shoebox at bottom of Tech Garden.
Shoebox. Yeah. So, but I do think that public awareness is increasing. We know that each of the what you might call the target audiences of our shows are very aware of us. We deliver to different niches, different groups in the community, and we know how important we are to them. But we've often felt that the public at large are not that aware of exactly who we are, what importance we have socially, and etc. But I'm just feeling during this period there is an increase in public awareness of what we do. And of course, as a sector, we're very busy trying to get that message out, and I feel it's really starting to work.
I agree, and I think the online proposition, much as I've got a couple of teenagers at home and I'd really like to turn the internet off some days, has helped us tremendously. For our volunteer program makers who say, let's say they do a 1-hour show once a week, well, it probably takes them at least 2 hours to prepare that show, and to come into the station. Then there's the hour to deliver it, and then go home and pack down and all that. To be able to give them a global audience and an on-demand audience. So, at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, we have a program called The Book Show, and everybody loves to read books. Well, most people love to read books, but at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, we're busy having life, doing work, so we don't get to hear it. So having the on-demand proposition of a podcast has made those programs accessible to the convenience generation who want stuff when they want it, right then, right there. And podcasting, and the other benefit is that we are not only providing our volunteers with better value for their time, but we're actually giving our sector quantifiable details. We know how many people are consuming the online product, and we can measure in real terms the growth that we get from online consumers. Whereas when the program goes out on a transmitter, it's blind faith, and you hope that there's somebody out there and someone who's enjoying it. And until the phone rings, you're never ever really sure. So there are sides to that part of what we do that technology has enhanced from our volunteers' perspective.
Yeah, and it's not just that it increases the potential audience. It means that because it hangs around as a podcast or whatever, then the on-demand thing kicks in, and if you were unable to listen to the broadcast, then you can catch it when it is convenient to you. That's great.
Yep. I was listening to my show. A show that I do on Thursday nights as I drove into work, and occasionally people have gotten into my car and gone, "Are you actually listening to yourself?" I go, "Yeah, I don't hear it when I'm doing it because I'm busy doing it, and I kind of like what it is that I'm playing. So I don't mind having a listen to it, but I listen to all the other program makers, and it's interesting when you give them feedback. They go, "Oh, do you listen?" "Yes, I do." So you get to rock out the old big brother managerial hat from time to time.
Yes, it's funny, that phenomenon, though, when you're on air and you're concentrating on doing it. And in my case, because, well, it's the same with you, Darren, as the manager, you're also got a head full of everything else that you're supposed to be doing. So once it's all over, if somebody said, "What did you do on your program today?" there's a good chance that you don't know.
Yeah, because you come out of the studio and your head's swimming. And that's just from my position, where I get to turn the microphone off and play along, and I can relax. I don't have to worry about anybody looking at me. You've got an entirely different proposition with Arrow FM, and it's fabulous. We look at what's gone on at your station. I think, okay, how whilst we don't have a regional television station anymore, how can we look at what we do from the visual delivery perspective, and maybe vodcasting? And we haven't had conversations like that since in real life last night.
Yeah. Yes, although we have regional television, and that is great, this is going live at this very moment on Wairarapa Television, Channel 41, Freeview. You don't need that because, as you say yourself, vodcasting or the fact that this program will be available in a couple of hours' time on our webpage as a video podcast. And we noticed that our broadcasters, here's a funny thing, they're getting better because they're on the telly. There's something about it that makes them, maybe it's because, I don't know, somebody's looking at me. There's more of a feeling of visibility, obviously, and people have sharpened up their acts just a little bit. They were always good, but
there's a degree of that. We had a regional television station in Southland for many years. It only just wound itself up a couple of years ago, and I was involved with it for quite some time and doing live broadcasting. And even though I've been a broadcaster for, 30 plus years, you do kind of sharpen up when there's a spotlight on you, and that somebody is not only listening but watching. You can slouch in a chair in a radio studio, but you've got to have your game face on when there's a camera looking at you as well.
Yeah, although sometimes I think it's quite charming if I slouch. Sometimes I had Jane Ross phones in or does a video call in every week with a film tips, things to watch when you're being a couch potato during the lockdown period. And she's got such great knowledge, and she's so compelling that I've got very little to do or say, except occasionally show her that I'm still listening. So I put my feet up and have a good slouch. Largely the camera shot remains on her because it sticks with the person who's talking. But if I do go, yep, it'll cut back to me, and I don't have my game face on.
But one of the great things about broadcasting is, and particularly from the access media sector, is we talk to our volunteers about the fact that we don't want you sounding like me. Okay, so I've been a professional broadcaster for decades. We want people sounding like real people. And so for us to be in a position where, we're slouching in the studio, we're getting comfy here, we're relaxed, we're listening to what it is that you've got to say, I think that adds a nice human touch. It's, before people come in and make radio, they're really nervous, and you say, well, what are you worried about? Oh, I'm worried about making a mistake. Great, well, you're worrying about something that hasn't happened. What are you going to do? You're going to trip over your tongue. Yeah? I've probably done that half a dozen times already, and nobody cares. It's reminding people it's what they have to say that's important, not necessarily how they're saying it. And there's nothing wrong with chilling out and having a good. I'm a relaxed person listening to what it is that you're suggesting I should be watching over the next week. I have to find that show of yours on podcasts.
Yeah. Well, it's not all chilling out for me, because we're using this period of lockdown to kind of refine some of the things that we're doing here and try out some new things. And when you try out new things, stuff's going to go wrong. And I've been taking one for the team, really, by coming in here and knowing there's a good chance I'm going to screw it up, or the thing itself is going to screw up. And it's been a really good kind of soak test period, so that I'm hoping when the broadcasters come back, we can say, there's some new things, but don't worry about it, because we've already solved them. Meanwhile, I think my viewers / listeners are getting used to the fact that at least once per program, I'm completely lost. Don't know why something isn't working. Don't know if it's my fault or what the hell. So no, I'm not that relaxed, but it's a valuable thing to be doing, I hope, during this period.
It's been interesting from our broadcasters' point of view, where several of them have made me aware that they've started listening to me, and they are reassured by the fact that I'll trip over a crack in the pavement and stumble along for the next 20 steps, and then turn around and look to see who noticed. Actually, I did that on the street the other day, and once they realise that, he does it too, and he doesn't care. It's there, it's gone, and I don't even ask for it to be edited out before it goes into a podcast. It's real. It's just what happens. I haven't had something go wrong in live radio since yesterday. I wonder what it is that's going to happen today. But in the end, it's radio. It's not rocket science. It doesn't matter. And if we've tried something and it didn't work, that's okay. People are hearing a live experiment. It's almost like you're giving them a cuddle and come in and say, be part of the family. See how we do this thing, particularly with Arrow's perspective, when they are literally seeing how you do this thing.
It's funny, sometimes a new program maker will say, I'd like to ease myself into it. Perhaps we could start by pre-recording until I get good enough to go live. And I go, no. You can go live until you're good enough to pre-record. Because a funny thing happens. Once you record and you're able to edit and do all that stuff, then you're going to do that stuff. You're going to stop and go, I just want to go over that. Oops, I made a mistake. I'm just going to do this. The wonderful thing about live is if you knock over a whole tray of CDs and they go flying across the floor, you say to people, just a moment, I have to gather up the CDs. Oh, no, I've stood on one. Oh, no, my coffee. And it makes for great radio. Being live
it does
is
real.
Magic.
It's human. Yeah. You can watch people who are doing live news broadcasts on television, and tell those who've come from a radio background, those who are used to talking their way through situations rather than those who are used to reading a script. And go, oh, look, it's happened. Just carry on. There's that idiot that suddenly starts jumping around in the background. Either it's going to throw you or what have you. Having done live radio in the public for many years in the commercial sector, there aren't too many things, I think, apart from a nudist wandering behind me that has thrown me before. I've been defecated on by a seagull standing in the wrong place. Or actually, one Anzac morning, I was covering a dawn service, and it was a little drizzly down here in Southland, as it's wont to get sometimes. That's how we're so green, and so I was sheltering under a tree, which was fine. Bearing in mind this is just before dawn, and one of the things that they do at the dawn parade, although obviously not this year, was they fire a very large gun. What I didn't realise is there were some 30 starlings sitting above me in a tree, and they all had the same fright at the same moment. It was a bit messy.
Right. Hey, I'm fascinated by the nudist behind you. Was this an Access Radio thing? Because on Access Radio, that's a viable and accepted minority group, and so it's perfectly fine for them to do that. But I suspect it wasn't.
Well, that's just open. We do have a Sun Club down here, and maybe we should be knocking on their door and inviting them onto our airways. No, it was in commercial radio, and it was somebody who was virtually streaking. Yeah, it was an interesting moment. I mean, it was radio. I was really the only person who saw it, and they were trying to put me off, and it kind of worked.
Radio streaking is a great concept.
Oh, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on in the studio that you just can't share with people sometimes. Well, that was in the old context. Back at one of the stations that I worked at, they looked at, when we had regional television start here, they wanted to have a camera in the studio, much like Arrow has got now. And a lot of what we were doing at that stage involved theatre of the mind. And we didn't we were trying to figure out how do we get past that. That's a different proposition to what we do in Access, but there's nothing like those little live incidents that, unless you're electrocuting yourself when you spill a drink into the desk, and then you've got to, once you've defrazzled your hair, you've got to deal with some grumpy technician who's going to go, oh, I told you not to do this. I know. Excuse me, I'm just heading off to A&E. Don't mind me.
Darren, we should probably finish quite soon, but it's been a real pleasure talking with you, and it's great to hear what's going on in the other stations too, because especially during this period, I'm here in my little solo bubble, but I've had a chat with various managers around the country, and interestingly, they've all said they're feeling busier than ever.
Yep. It's times like this, it's times of adversity, it's times of disaster, it's times of challenge where radio gets the opportunity to shine. And certainly in our sector, we're a tremendously bright light. I'm expecting 3 wise men with frankincense and myrrh and what have you to turn up very shortly looking for a baby.
Of course, yes. You're a bit early there, but...
Well, get in early for Christmas. We've just gone through Easter, so I'm expecting Halloween decorations to be at the warehouse as soon as it opens.
Of course, yeah. Darren, great to chat with you. Keep doing that fabulous stuff that you do, as all the managers do across the 12 Access Radio media stations across our country. And I hope your day and your level 3 continues to be productive.
Thanks, Michael. Pleasure to talk to you. Take care.
See you. Right, so Darren Ludlow there from Radio Southland. I told you that there's always something I get a little bit wrong, and I'm trying to get the CD player to play because I really want you to hear another track from Lorenzo Buna, but it's not behaving. Oh, maybe it will. Come on. All right, let's see. Here we go. Let's play a track called Lasciami perdere. No, perdere. Hang on, where are you? All right, off you go, Lorenzo Bune. Lasciami perdere by Lorenzo Bune. Hey, it's been great being with you this morning. Really good to chat with Darren, manager of Radio Southland, the access radio station down there. Some particular challenges that they've faced because they've had what was the largest cluster in New Zealand down there at the moment, but it sounds like they're managing it really well. All right, that's it from me. I've got other stuff to do, and so have you. Get on with it. Gee, how many times do I have to tell you?